Welcome to the Brief on Grief. I am your host, Walter Sanderson. So glad you could join us for yet another episode. On last episode, we began talking about the acronym T.E.A.R. And I was telling you it's a model that was created by a psychologist simply to help people in their mourning process. On our last episode, we dealt with the T, which was simply trying to accept the loss. And on this episode, we're going to pick right back up where we left off, and we're going to focus on the E. And the E stands for experiencing the pain of the loss. For somebody that needs you to know, our listeners, that this can be loaded. Sometimes it can be difficult depending on who we lost. Who I lost. For somebody, did you lose a friend? Did you lose a coworker? Possibly, you could have lost an aunt or an uncle. And maybe it was even for somebody, a father or their mother. And the reason I said it's a loaded question is because the relationship sometimes determines how hard I need to grieve and mourn. At times, it dictates the level of pain depending on the relationship. For someone, their mom and their dad is the highest level of the grief that you could ever feel. But for somebody else, maybe your mom and dad wasn't an integral part of your life and you were raised by your grandparent. Maybe your aunt or your uncle was the closest thing that you knew to a mother or a father. And sometimes it can even be loaded because you've lost one thing at the same time of losing something else. I've had clients sometimes that have lost a loved one in a fire. Think about that for a moment. They're experiencing the loss of the loved one while at the same time experiencing the loss of their home, the loss of their memories, and the loss of all of their things that they need. And sometimes all of the memories that you would have, the pictures, the videos, are all gone at the same time. When we think about the E, the experiencing the pain, many times, many of us want immediate relief from our pain. And I'm here to tell you that that is not likely. And even when other people put a timetable on us, they should not. We have to have moments where we can experience the pain. And so on this episode, let me ask somebody, take a moment to think about what emotions have you been experiencing? What feelings have you been having over your loved one's loss? And who do you talk to about these feelings? What events and gatherings do you go to? Possibly, what space do you create to experience your pain? And if you haven't been doing this, and you've gotten to a place where you are still trying to accept the reality and trying to experience the pain, I'm asking you this question: what is holding you back from doing so? Experiencing the pain that you feel. Just know that these feelings can be a wide variety because grief is more than sadness. I'll repeat that again for somebody. Grief is more than sadness. Grief manifests itself physically. And if you're like me, then maybe when you lost your loved one, you've been lacking the ability to get a good night's rest, a lack of sleep. Some people, because of the physical manifestations, they suffer from headaches and even migraines at times, especially even if you haven't been diagnosed with migraines in the past. Some of us deal with dizziness, an upset stomach, back pain, chest tightness, outside, of course, of the medical etiologies that could cause that. Some of us physically have trouble eating. We have a loss of appetite. And then some of us can even develop excessive sleep patterns and even excessive eating patterns, which are all normal physical manifestations of grief. And as we mourn, we want to find a way to experience the pain of the loss. Those I gave you are just a few of the physical feelings we can feel and deal with during our mourning. But not only is grief not just sadness and physical manifestations, but there are social manifestations. We feel like wanting to be in isolation, not being around anybody. There's a lack of communication sometimes for many of us. Think about that person that you knew was the employee of the year on your job, and they lost a loved one, and now you can't even find them, or it's even difficult for them to come into work. It's difficult for some of us to even concentrate when we are mourning. And sometimes we may even get stuck on social media simply because it's a distraction. And so there are physical manifestations when we experience in the pain of our lost loved ones. And the social feelings are easy at times for us to acknowledge. And also the emotional feelings. Somebody knows what it's like to feel the sadness, the guilt, the anger. Some of us feel numbness. You feel depression, and the list goes on. And as a reverend and as a pastor myself, it's important that I share these next feelings because we deal with them despite our faith. Sometimes my faith is lacking, and I feel at times like I'm hopeless. I may struggle to even find meaning in my life. This is all part of experiencing the pain of those losses in our lives. I struggle to find meaning in my life. And at times I can become angry with God. Yes, that's what I said. And I'll be the first to share this with you. For somebody in your mourning, in your sadness, in your physical and social, and even in your spiritual manifestations from grief, I need you to know God has no problems with your anger after losing a loved one or your questions, because we don't understand everything. And because of these social feelings, there are times that people you know may even find themselves distant from church. Those are all the things that we experience during our mourning process. And remember, grief again is more than sadness and affects us all differently. And not only are things different, I too, after the loss, am different as well. It's natural and normal and productive when I experience the pain from my loss. I hope for somebody this is helpful, because sometimes we think we have to go about it. The T part of it was trying to accept the reality, but the experiencing part of it, the pain part of it, is something that happens to us whether we seek it or not. And I hope for somebody you're able to see the manifestations and know that nothing is wrong with you. You are simply going through the mourning process of the grief you have on you inside. And that you know that you are simply experiencing the pain from the loss of your loved one. I hope the mourning model of the T.E.A.R, the T.E.A.R, has been helpful to you on today. And join us again next week for our episode where we will continue the T.E.A.R model and deal with the A. And dealing with the A, we are finding how we adjust to our new normal. Again, as always, if this episode has been helpful, please share and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And remember that we all know someone that is grieving, and that person might be the person that you see in the mirror. See you next time on the Brief on Grief.